Welcome to First Parish Unitarian Universalist of Medfield. Welcome to all of you who are streaming in from home, and welcome to any visitors who are here this morning. We hope you'll all stay for social hour following the service that'll be happening downstairs. This congregation first gathered in 1651, and this historic meeting house was built in 1789 on the unceded ancestral lands of the Nipmuc. Welcome. Welcome to this place. Here we search for truth and understanding. Here we celebrate life and we contemplate its mysteries. Here we share healing and wholeness. So whoever you are, wherever you come from, whomever you love, we welcome you to this congregation.
This morning's chalice lighting is The Abundance of Our Lives Together by Katie Gelfand. We light our chalice as a symbol of gratitude as we celebrate the abundance of our lives together. In this sanctuary, we harvest bushels of strength for one another and offer our crop with the hands of compassion and generosity. In the authentic and gentle manner of our connections, we cultivate a simple sweetness to brighten our spirits. May we be grateful for the ways we nourish and uplift each other, for it is the sharing of this hallowed time together that sustains us.
Friends, to worship means to consider that which has worth. Today we consider with gratitude the many gifts of this community. The opportunity to be affirmed in who we are and to offer that affirmation to others. The chance to stand together to help remake the world in the ideal of justice. The freedom to choose one's own path to truth and to learn from the experience of others. So this morning, let's welcome all of these gifts with our deepest gratitude, for they have been paid for with many currencies. The dollars and cents of those who gave what they could and then stretched just a little bit more. The tears of those who struggled to build better lives for themselves and to others. And the infinite small acts of service that make the parts greater than the whole. Today we consider with gratitude and humility what it means to pay forward what has been paid forward to us. Come, let us worship together. Please rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In, which is number 361 in your gray hymnal. You may be seated. Please join me now in a spirit of prayer and meditation. O Spirit of life, Spirit of love, let us turn now inward. Feel the rhythm of your breath in and out. In and out. Find the peace of just being with the flow of your breath. Letting go of yesterday. Letting go of tomorrow. Feel the restorative power of the peace of this moment. A peace large enough to open to all the concerns and the sorrows that trouble us. Stillness quiet enough to respond to the joys and the celebrations that enliven us. Your safety here in the rhythm of the breath. The ebb and flow of life is enacted with each one. Taking in the fullness of experience, letting go of the residue that wants to cling to us. Cultivate inner peace and inner safety here in the sanctuary, dedicated to cultivating the spirit of life, dedicated to being a beacon of love for all beings. Let's hold all this in our hearts as we enter into a time of silent meditation. Amen. Well, now I'd invite forward Don Rolfe and Mary Corthell, the co-chairs of our annual fund drive committee.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mary Corthell, and as we enter into Commitment Sunday and close out our annual fund drive, we do so with such gratitude and real warmth from our heart, as we are the stewards of the now, and we bring this threshold of closing consciously to an end. And with deep gratitude, love, and warmth, we say thank you.
And I'm Don Roll, co-chair. So this was the number of pledges. We have 38 confirmed pledges with numbers. We actually have an additional pledge where the person will pledge, is guaranteed to pledge, but could not give us a number at the time. Now, we had a second goal, which was $138,000, and I am pleased to announce that the pledge drive has received pledges for $139,000, with one pledge outstanding. Okay, so we've exceeded our goal. A lot of people went into making this happen. Obviously, Mary. I'd like to recognize Marshall, who's not here. We also have the main members of the committee, George Lester. Fritz, please stand. And Duncan Glover, who's not here. We had some leads. Allison and David Temple, please stand. Actually, stay standing. We've got more to do. And also Arnold Kalmbach and Cunningham. But I'd also like the entire congregation to please stand and give yourselves a hand for a successful pledge drive. This parish runs on us who are here, on what we do, and on our financial commitment. And you have stood up this year outstandingly to try and make sure that we are stable financially. We cannot, and I say we because we get to thank ourselves for what we've done. Thank you.
Yeah, let's hear it again for Don and Mary for leading this effort. Thank you so much. All right, well, now I'd invite forward Dewey for the morning's reading.
This is Sustaining the Tree of Life by the Reverend Lynn Gardner. The tree stood in the middle of the village. Its trunk was so large that it took 6 people holding hands to reach around it. The roots were strong and wide, and its branches spread out all over the village square, offering shelter from the rain or shade from the summer sun. Its fruit was juicy, sweet, and plentiful. The people of the village loved the tree. Children played beneath it and climbed its lowest branches. Young people knew that if you whispered your dreams to the tree, they were more likely to come true. People who proclaimed their love or friendship for one another beneath its branches found their relationships to be nourishing, and the elders discovered that their sweetest memories could be counted on when they were near the great tree. One day, a traveling merchant arrived in the village. He rested in the shade and ate 2 pieces of delicious fruit. "This fruit is incredible," he said. "I would like to have some to sell to the next village that I visit. Who owns this tree?" "No one owns this tree," replied a villager. If anything, we belong to it. Well then, if no one owns the tree, then no one will mind if I pick the fruit, said the merchant, and began to fill a basket. I mind, said the villager, and today I am the keeper of the tree. What do you mean, keeper of the tree? We each take our turn here being with the tree. We could never own it. We are here as protectors, as sustainers. That's ridiculous. This tree doesn't need you. You could just take what you need, take what you want. The tree will continue. But the villager couldn't be persuaded. Sir, this tree isn't like that. We don't come here to take from it, even though we receive much. We are the keepers of the tree because this is where we are nourished. This is where some of our most precious memories are, and where our people have dreamed. This is where we remember who we want to become. Well, said the merchant, you may think that this tree is very special, but still doesn't need you to sit with it. That's preposterous. Ah, replied the villager, the tree itself may not need me, but what of the others who come by? Just this morning I sat with a woman whose heart was heavy with worry. Had I not been here, she would have had to carry that weight alone. And this afternoon, a tired couple came by, and they rested with me. They said that they had been looking for a place like this. Then an elder came by, and we watched the birds in the branches together. And now you are here. You were confused about what this tree is, and how to be with it. Imagine if you had arrived and not found anyone here to talk with. You might have continued thinking that everything you do is all about you. And the merchant sat for a while in the shade, thinking about these ideas that felt new and a little challenging. As the sun went down, he picked up his bag and headed out of town, whistling a song that he hadn't thought of in years. On his way, he shared a smile with each person he met, his heart feeling strangely light and joyful. And the people of the village? They continued to sustain the tree of life, to care for one another, and to share their gifts with grace and gratitude.
Thank you, Dewey. Well, I'd like to start this morning with saying a heartfelt thank you. Thank you to all of the members and friends who made a financial pledge to this congregation. Your generosity deeply matters to the flowering of this congregation and to our values of love and justice seeking in the world. By giving of your time, talent, and treasure, you become sacred caretakers of this congregation that has been around for 373 years. By practicing generosity, you become stewards of the now, handing down a precious gift for all the generations to come, so that First Parish will be here for another 373 years. Thank you. For your generosity truly matters. You know, I've always loved the Buddhist take on generosity. In Pali, the language of the Buddha, the word for it is dana. In some traditional Buddhist practice, students are not even taught to meditate until they have established a practice of open-hearted generosity, of dana. Lack of generosity often comes from fear, a fear that there will not be enough for me, not enough love, not enough money or time or safety, not enough grace. When we constrict into fear, we hold on to what we have all the more tightly. And the tighter we hold, the more precious and scarce our resources seem. And so we hold on even more tightly. Generosity, it seems, does not come naturally to us. We must practice it. Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield writes, "Our fear creates a constricted and false sense of self. This false or small self grasps our limited body, feelings, and thoughts, and tries to hold and to protect them. We're afraid to open, to change, to live fully. A contracted identification with this body of fear becomes our habit. Out of this fear, all our greed, hatred, and delusion arise. Yet underneath it, we will find an openness and wholeness that can be called our true nature, our original state, our Buddha nature. If living in this body of fear is a habit, then we must practice generosity instead until it too becomes a habit. In the biblical story that you're mostly all familiar with, the story of the Good Samaritan, I doubt that the Samaritan woke up that morning and decided to be generous. But that's what happened. The two people who crossed the road to avoid the beaten man, they were afraid. In biblical times, a priest and a Levite would have been conditioned to avoid the bloody scene because blood was considered unclean. But when the Samaritan came across the man lying beaten in the ditch, something different happened. The Greek text tells us he had a gut-wrenching experience. Something moved. Something snapped inside of him. We have no reason to believe that the Samaritan was ever generous before that day. Samaritans at that time were reviled by the people who wrote and read the Gospels. Yet at that moment, he was hit in the gut with empathy. His life stopped. His journey changed course. And I wonder whose life was changed more by this act of generosity. As John Lennon put it, instant karma is going to get you. Going to knock you right off your feet. Better recognize your brother, everyone you meet. Sometimes we're given the great gift of being knocked off our feet by deeper truths. More often, we forget and we live in our body of fear, our sense of the scarcity of resources, our sense of powerlessness, of our own need, our anger, and our greed. There's so much in our culture which reinforces our fear and anxiety. It tells us that there is indeed not enough and that we are inadequate. Taking on generosity as a spiritual practice, it serves to soften and open us. Indeed, it can be downright countercultural to live into a practice of generosity. So how do we go about practicing our generosity? And here I'm talking both about the generosity of spirit and the material generosity reflected in what you give of your money to this congregation and elsewhere. People often want to make a distinction between these two kinds of generosity. But I really think it's a false dichotomy. They both come from the same place and are essentially the same practice. Generosity of all kinds means that we withhold less, we resist withdrawing into our tight little hearts, we stop holding on to our money with such tight hands. And indeed, as the practice of generosity deepens, we can find our hearts and our hands opening simultaneously. Generosity is one of those dynamics of reciprocity. We usually think that generosity benefits the people and the things we give to, and of course it does. Yet I also find that I feel so much better when I live with the openness that practicing generosity brings to me. I'm a happier person when I can live with both an open heart and open hands. Practicing generosity helps me to trust more that the seeds that I send out, the greater the chances for me and for the other things I care about to flourish. I trust that such generosity is more than giving. It is participating in creation, in creating community, creating love, making channels for the streams of love. So we must practice generosity, not just at the times when something smacks us in the face, but throughout our daily lives. Too often we're like the priest and the Levite in the Good Samaritan story. We're conditioned by our culture to cross the street, to avoid eye contact with yet another homeless person asking for money, to assume that the driver of the car who just cut us off as a jerk. Through a practice of generosity, we can recondition ourselves to start from a place of abundance and generosity. You can begin that practice right here in this congregation. It's one of the wonderful things about community. We get to practice on one another. How do you practice generosity? I see such open-heartedness among you. You care well for one another. There's an abundance of gifts among you. You're generous with your wisdom, your work, and your wealth. But sometimes there's also a tight-handedness and a sense of scarcity. The fear arises that there will never be enough, that there will always be a struggle for money and for enough people to do the work that we are called to do. This practice of generosity does take a leap of faith sometimes. Faith that there really is enough, that you really are enough. When you give more abundantly of whatever precious resource you fear is too scarce, you can come to understand how your survival depends upon such generosity, not just the survival of this community, but of your very selves. And you see how much you can create when you practice such generosity together. Intentionally cultivating and practicing such generosity not only helps others, it opens our hearts as well. Jack Kornfield writes, "Underneath our greed and our fear, we will find an openness and wholeness that can be called our true nature, our Buddha nature." Buddhist belief holds that at our core, each of us is deeply and fundamentally good. We possess Buddha nature, potential Buddhahood. Each of us has a deep reservoir of goodness and kindness, of generosity and potential. Imagine going through daily life looking for the Buddha in everyone you meet. We all want to be seen for the good, dear people we are deep down inside. Yet we're so quick to judge. We fail to give others what we most want in the world. Practicing living from a spirit of generosity can help change that. When I was an elementary school art teacher, I never knew exactly what to do when a child told me that someone had said or done something mean to them. As we all know, children are capable of sometimes saying extraordinarily awful things to one another. And I knew I had to respond somehow. But I also knew that there were at least two sides of every story, and that I'd never figure out who started what. So often I would bring the two children together and say something like, "Johnny says you did this really mean thing to him." Well, the accused invariably protested that Johnny also said or did something mean. And I would say, "I know that when people say mean things, it's usually because they're having a really bad day. I'm sorry that you're feeling so badly today." And more often than not, this response simply confused both children who had been expecting some sort of retribution. And I'm not really sure if it ever sunk in, but the way I could respond to an underlying truth was to call out their Buddha nature. We're all Buddhas, and sometimes we're having a really bad day. I challenge you to walk through your life this next week and search for the Buddha in every person you meet. It's a whole lot easier with people who are being thoughtful and attentive, of course. It's much harder when someone cuts you off in traffic or is rude in the checkout line. Perhaps you might think to yourself, "There goes a Buddha having a bad day." It may not help them, but I'll bet you might feel a bit more open, kind, and generous. For when we see the nascent Buddha in one another, we're more likely to find it within ourselves. Communities like this congregation are vital for such practice. We need this practice so that we can remain open and not pull away, even in those fearful times. Remember that you practice generosity not simply for others, not just so that First Parish may survive and thrive, but for yourselves. We all have Buddha nature deep within us. Practicing generosity calls to the deepest parts of ourselves, calls us to the very openness and wholeness that we long for. Sometimes all it means is a smile of greeting. Sometimes we are called to help someone in great need. Sometimes we're asked to give of our resources, even as our time and money seem precious and scarce. Sometimes we must forgive one another generously. This generosity of spirit is one of the great spontaneous acts of the human heart. It can arrive in our lives as sheer grace, and yet the more we practice it, the more our hearts open and the more abundantly we all live. By practicing generosity, we learn how it feels to live abundantly. We learn how it feels to share the love in our hearts. We learn to give away what we have, knowing that it's the only way that we can create love. Knowing that this is not only the way we survive, but how we create the world we want to see. The world in our own hearts, and the world we open to create beyond. As my colleague, the Reverend Barbara Hamilton Hallway says, not only is it true that as you give, you will be replenished, not only is it true that what you give returns to you, giving truly brings you back to life. Giving more generously than you imagined you could gets the old heart beating. Giving makes you feel vital and connected. Giving opens you to the love of living. You are a person that has something to give. Live abundantly and delight in that giving. So may it be. Amen. Now I'd invite forward Don Rolfe to introduce the morning's offering.
Well, as I've said many, many times, there are three things that support this community. It's us, it's what we do, and it's our financial commitment to make things work. The offering this week is split between First Parish and the Mass Climate Action Network. We have committed to actions to be a green community. This is our opportunity to also contribute our financial resources to help ensure that Massachusetts is a green community. We hope you'll be generous and your offerings will be gratefully received.
Please rise in body or in spirit for our closing hymn, We Are Building a New Way, which is number 1017 in your teal hymnal.
Good morning, I'm Eva Kendrick, and we are going to do something a little different today with the idea that this is a less familiar hymn that I only program maybe once a year or so. I've asked Faye if she can lead the hymn today, so she will be singing the first verse by herself, so you can hear the melody, and then we'll invite you all to join in on the second verse and beyond. So thank you, Faye, for leading us today.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, the world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
In closing, I leave you with the words of John C. Morgan. In the end, it won't matter how much we have, but how generously we have given. It won't matter how much we know, but rather how well we have lived. And it won't matter how much we believe, but how deeply we have loved. So it may be. Go in peace.
Till we meet again, we share our sacred trust to live in light, to do the right, and grow in love and care. Amen.
I'll now extinguish our chalice, but may its light and warmth stay in our hearts until we meet again. Here ends our worship. Let our service begin.